all that stuff. And then we'll go on to monetary unit sampling. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 exams are combined. Okay, so today we're going to start on with Chapter 5, continue on Chapter 5, and then we're going to go to do some more of the monetary unit sampling. Okay. Okay, so documentary evidence. And I think my spacing got goofed up here. Okay, I think I'm on the same page as you guys know. Documentary evidence. Now, not all evidence is the same. There's good evidence and not so good evidence. And so the rankings are based on who created it and who holds it. I'll give you some examples here in a little bit. So the best evidence was created by a third party, someone other than the client, and they're held by the third party. In other words, the client doesn't get a chance to hold the evidence themselves. Medium evidence, created by a third party, but held by the client. And the worst evidence, created by the client and held by the client. And just so you know, created by the client, held by the client. This is the stuff generated from the client's accounting system. You cannot base an audit purely on the client's accounting system. There has to be some other kind of corroboration for it. Okay. So for instance, a sales invoice. A sales invoice is created by the client. He's down here. Yeah, I do. Okay. Vendor invoice for purchases created by the vendor. Now the client would probably have that because the client would get the invoice from wherever they made the purchase from, and they would say, pay this bill. Receiving report. When something comes into a company, they usually have a receiving department. And the receiving department, the stuff will come in and they'll make a receiving report on it. And that receiving report is generated by the client, but it's on stuff that comes from outside. And usually that's matched up with the invoice. What's ever on the receiving report, whatever they received, should be on the invoice. Not necessarily what they ordered, because they may not have been shipped everything. If I ordered 10 of these and I got 8 of them, the invoice should say 8, and then my receiving report should say 8. Those two should match, and I should only pay for 8 of them. So the receiving report basically comes from the receiving department of the client. Bill of lading. This is a very good document. When you do auditing, you will learn to love the bill of lading. What is a bill of lading? A bill of lading is it's a document. It's they've been around for hundreds of years, and it's basically when you have something shipped. And notice when you have something shipped, there's a kind of a strange thing that happens. You give the shipping company, whoever they are, the item, but you don't give them title. They don't own it. So if I'm shipping this to somebody, I give this to the, whoever's shipping it, FedEx or whatever. I give it to them. They take it. It's not theirs though. So there's this thing that what they're doing basically is acknowledging that they're taking this item, and that item that they're going to transport that to whoever is going. So that's a bill of lading. Now, here's the important thing about it. The important thing about bill of lading is there's 2 copies of each one of these made, one for the shipper, whoever the client is, and then also the shipping company will have one. And you can ask for the shipping company's bill of lading. So that's the third party, third party, and it's held by the third party. You can get it right from the shipper, this bill of lading. So it's a good document to know if something was shipped. And notice that if, for instance, if someone was to make fictitious sales, if someone were to say, okay, let's just write some extra sales. Our sales are down, and we're in trouble, so let's just put some fictitious sales on the books, right? There's not going to be a shipping document. There's not going to be a bill of lading. And even if they make a bill of lading, themselves, you go to the shipping company, and they're like, well, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't have a bill of lading for that because nothing was shipped. And you say, okay, well, how about if they ship it to a warehouse instead of shipping it, Okay, well, then there'd be a shipping document. So, here's the warehouse, and you go to the warehouse. And so a shipping document is a very important document. It shows the intent of the client to actually make a sale, that something was put on the truck. Someone else is going to have to sign and say that this was put on the truck. So it's a very good document for proving that the client actually made the attempt to ship something somewhere. It may have been lost in shipping. It may have been stolen off the truck. The truck may have been stolen with it in it. You don't know what's going to happen, but the intent was that this was a sale. So bill of lading is actually a very important document. And whenever it comes to whether there's a sale made or something like that, the bill of lading is the one you want to look for. Okay, what does it do? It transfers the possession of the goods. Here's the goods. It lists the number of them and the weights, signed by everybody, has the seller and the buyer's address. The prices are usually not included because they're not important. Notice that the shipper is not selling anything. The shipper's not, they don't have any stake in this, whatever they are. So there's no reason to put the prices on there, and usually they don't. There is going to be a price agreement between the buyer and the seller, but on the bill of lading, it's generally not on there. Okay, another one is the proof of delivery. And we kind of all know what that is. It's the proof that something was actually delivered. If you've ever dealt with Amazon or something, Amazon always takes a picture and we just delivered this. It's in front of my neighbor's house, but go to my neighbor and get my whatever it is. But anyway, a proof of delivery is just what it says: proof that it was delivered. And so the proof that it was delivered is not as important as the bill of lading, and here's why. The bill of lading shows intent. Now, even if it didn't make it to the client, or to their I shouldn't say client, to the client's customer, even if it didn't make it to the client's customer, the bill of lading proves that they tried to ship it, that this is not a fictitious sale. And proof of delivery, for whatever reason, there's a problem with the delivery. That happens every day, but it's not fraud, right? So bill of lading is actually, of these two, is the more important one because it shows evidence of intent, an honest sale. And if it doesn't make it there, that does happen. The insurance involved and all that kind of stuff. But anyway. Okay, so let's rank the following evidence. Customer purchase order. What do you think? So a customer sends an order that they want to buy something, they send it to the client, your client. Which one do you think? You put it in chat if you want.
Would it be best?
It could be better if they send it directly to you, the auditor. It would be best, but usually it's sent to the client. Usually it'd be medium. It could be though if you ask the customer to send it directly to you, it could be. Sales order. Yeah, I got that one up here. Well, maybe I don't. Sales order is basically the same thing as is close to the sales invoice. Sales order may have additional things that don't get shipped. For instance, like I talked about, if someone calls up and orders, 10 trucks and you send, or 10 cars or toys or whatever, you send 8. But this is made by the client and it's held by the client. This is the worst. Pick list or packing list, worst. Oops. Sales invoice, that's going to be made by the client, held by the client. It's the worst. They can just print out sales invoices. They can print out packing lists. They can print out sales orders. Bill of lading, this is usually held by the shipper. You can get this from the shipper. So this is often going to be the best because it would be held by a third party and the auditors can usually access those. Now, I'm going to tell you one more thing about this. Oftentimes, we will try to move things up from the worst evidence or lower evidence up to, move it up the evidence hierarchy. We want to move it up to better evidence, right? One way we do that is getting the client's bank statement. Notice what happens, let's say our client's IBM. IBM has a bank, they do banking and they get bank statement. You're probably multiple bank statements, but they get bank statements from their bank to IBM saying, here's your stuff. It's probably online most likely. But anyway, what we can do is have the bank send those bank statements directly to the auditors. If it goes to the client, they have the possibility that they can alter it, right? Get the bank statement and 10,000 is a little low. Let's make that into a 3. Okay, now it's 30,000. Okay, if it's sent directly to the auditors, there's no chance of that. So we try to move stuff up. So a very common one is to have whatever your client, that you're doing the audit for, whatever their bank statements, having their bank statements sent directly to the auditor. So let me kind of show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple rows here. Okay, G. So bank statement held by client. Okay, that's going to be a third party held by the client. It'll be a medium. Bank statement sent to auditor. That same bank statement, if it's sent directly to the auditor, will turn into the best. Because the client has no possibility of altering it. If it's sent to the client, if it's a medium here, if it's a third party, and they send it to the client may alter it. So how do we move it up? How do we move it up the scale, up the hierarchy here? Well, have them send it directly to us. The third party is the bank, send it to us. It's held by the third party, it goes right to us. So that is the best. So we're always trying to make evidence better. That's a key thing about this. Okay, do I have these on one page or two? I don't know if the management represent, my spacing looks weird here, so I'm thinking this might be on. Is your number 5, is that on page 3 or 4? Or scratch that. Number 8, is that on page 3 or 4? I don't care.
It's on page 4 for me.
It's on page 4? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Management representation letter. What is it? The management representation letter is signed by the client's president and chief financial officer. The management representation letter letter contains language accepting responsibility for the financial statements, internal controls, and other uh, and other important aspects of the audit. So the big thing they do is they take responsibility. Let me do something here. Responsibility for the financial statements, internal controls. Sorry about that. I have my phone here. Other important aspects. If you guys take accounting 430, we go into what those are of the odd. Okay, well, also for the audit. So basically, it's saying, okay, look, we're responsible for this, for the financial statements, we're responsible for the internal controls, and we're responsible for anything else that we told you that you relied upon for the audit. If the president or CFO do not sign management letter, the appropriate opinion is a disclaimer of an opinion. Okay, so if they don't sign it, so you get the representation letter, and the CFO or the president, one of them. I'm sorry, it's not do not sign it. It's sign the management letter. The appropriate audit opinion is a disclaimer of an opinion. So if they don't sign it, immediately you go to why aren't they signing it? Why would the president or the CFO not sign the management letter? Saying that they don't take responsibility for the financial statements, internal controls, and other things that they told you. So it's kind of a serious thing. Now, one more thing about the management representation letter. The management representation letter does not replace audit evidence. So you can't say, okay, we'll just have them sign this letter and then we'll be off the hook because they said they're taking responsibility for it. It does not replace audit evidence. So you still need to get enough evidence to form an opinion for the financial statements. You cannot say, well, okay, we're not going to test this, but we'll put it in the management letter, and that we'll use that as the evidence. That's not evidence. Management representation letter is simply reminding the president and chief financial officer of the responsibilities, and that they've told you everything that you need to know, and that what they've told you is accurate. Any question on that? This is usually given on the last day of field work. See, I spelled sign correctly this time. So it's usually the last thing that you do is get this management letter signed, because then you'll have all the information and that they're agreeing to. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's go to lawyer letters. Okay, lawyer letters are letters from the client's lawyer with information regarding lawsuits and claims by the client. The client will provide information aspects. The lawyer letter will corroborate or refute let me clean this up. Okay, so the lawyer letter. It will provide information on legal aspects, and the lawyer letter will corroborate or refute the client's statement. So your main information is going to come from the client. The lawyer letter should have information that backs up what the client told you. U.S. standards require a lawyer letter. International standards do not. I think we talked about this, didn't we? I can't remember if we did or not. In the U.S., maybe we did. In the U.S., the legal system in the United States is way different than most virtually any place in the world. We have crazy, we have lawsuits for tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars all the time. Other countries don't have that. If somebody's injured or something, they have a system that'll figure out. It's almost like it's more like accounting. It's almost like tax or something. What the compensation will be for this person and that sort of thing. They don't have these multi-million-dollar, all over the press lawsuits for tens, 20s, 30 millions of dollars and all this kind of stuff. So in the United States, it's a much bigger risk. You could have a company that is it could literally go bankrupt because of a lawsuit for somebody that crashed a bicycle on their property or something. So you don't have that in other countries. So in other countries, they don't. It's not required. In the United States, it is, and it's required for that reason, that there could be this huge amount of liability out there that is not on the financial statements. Okay, so it's only required by the U.S. standards, but that's because it's really only a U.S. Problem. Okay. External confirmations. And we'll talk about what these are. External confirmations are trying to make accounts receivable get moved up into a higher level. What we're trying to do is take the client's accounts receivable. And notice a client could just make an accounts receivable out of the blue, put their dog's name on it, and say they sold something to the dog. So what we're going to do is try to take this. This is, for instance, this would be like accounts receivable. We're going to try to move it up to here, and we do this with the confirmation. So we're going to try to take this accounts receivable and make it into the best evidence by sending out a confirmation to the customer. Okay, US standards required. International standards, not required. They're actually having problems with this, by the way. This confirmations, big fraud cases by it. Okay, negative confirmations. Okay, so here's an idea of the confirmation. You say, let's say they have an accounts receivable for $2,000. They send out a confirmation letter to the customer, the client's customer. So IBM, they sell computers to somebody, and let's say it's for $2,000, and you want to know if IBM just didn't make that up, that they didn't send anything. So what you do is you send out a confirmation letter that gets sent back directly to the auditors, and that confirmation letter will say, "Do you owe $2,000?" Right? So that's a confirmation. Now, the two different types of confirmations we have is some of them must be sent back, and some of them are only going to be sent back if there is a problem. So a negative confirmation is only return the confirmation if there is a problem. So if $2,000 is correct, ignore this. If $2,000 isn't correct, write down what it should be and tell us why and send it back to us. So we're confirming these accounts receivable with a third party, and it's getting sent back to us. So we're a third party. So it'll always be held by a third party, so the client will not have the possibility of altering it. So this is what we're talking about doing when we do a confirmation. Send out a letter, is this correct? And then if it's a negative, well, let me write it in. I'm talking too much here. A negative confirmation. A negative confirmation, oops. A negative confirmation is only returned to, scratch this, bad marking. It only returned to the auditor if the amount is in dispute. A positive confirmation must be returned to the auditor. And the positive confirmation is it must be returned. So even if there's no dispute, you must return it. And if they don't send it back, you got to start making phone calls to call them up. Did you get this? Yeah, send it in. Did you get this? No, I'm going to send you another one. There's actually a problem with negative confirmations. Let's say you send out a negative confirmation and you don't hear anything back. What might a problem be with a negative confirmation? You send out a negative confirmation and you don't hear anything back. Now, on there it says if there's no problem, don't bother sending it back. However, what could be a problem with that? What could be a problem with a negative confirmation that might make you, I'll put it to you this way, negative confirmations are not as good as positive ones. Why? What could go wrong sending out a negative confirmation? Anyone? Put it in chat. What could go wrong? It's not a negative confirmation. No, I don't get anything back. Can I assume that everything's okay with that account? uh, Actually, you can't. Here's some problems you could have with that. You send out the negative confirmation. Maybe it's a fictitious account. It doesn't exist. You're not going to get anything back. It doesn't exist. Or send it to the wrong address. Someone else gets it. They have no idea what you're talking about, and they throw it in the garbage. Or the client's customer, whoever IBM sold the stuff, they do get it, and they go, "Oh, this is wrong. Oh, they're a bunch of idiots," and they crinkle it up and throw it in the garbage. You don't actually, if you don't get it back, it doesn't really tell you anything. The only thing that you can do for the negative confirmations is look at the ones that you do get back. But you can't make any assumption on the ones that you don't get back, because there could be a problem with that they didn't get it, or they didn't pay attention to it, or whatever it is, or they don't exist. So the negative confirmations are not as good as the positive ones. Okay, the positive ones, though, are a lot more work, because you send out 100 of them and you get 87 back. And you call up these people, you get another 5 trickle in. Then you call them up again, and they lost or whatever. You send them another one. They didn't get that one either. Finally you get down to the end and you go, okay, do you have a fax machine? Okay, go to the fax machine, and I'm going to send it to you right now. You end up with that kind of a situation. So the positive confirmations are a lot more work. They cost a lot more money. So, the question is, well, which one do we use? When do we use, whatever? All right. So negative confirmations. Generally speaking, this is kind of the breakdown of it. Negative confirmations are used for a test of many accounts with low dollar values. Positive confirmations for a test of few accounts with high dollar values. Okay, so negative confirmation are used for tests of many accounts with low dollar values. And the idea behind that is, even if they don't send it back, these are probably not material anyways, right? If you don't get, a few of these back, it probably doesn't make too much difference. They're not material, low dollar value. If there's a $50 account that really isn't right, or it should be $30 or something, probably doesn't matter too much. Positive confirmations are when you have few accounts with high dollar value. So maybe you have $50,000 accounts. Okay, those are a higher, those are more meaningful. So positive confirmations are used for when they have fewer accounts, but they have higher dollar value.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So you keep saying like that they'll send them back, but I'm like, who exactly is like the they in this situation? Is just the external?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Here, let me.
Like, do
No, no, no,
you
no.
understand that? Do you understand that confusion?
Yeah. Here, let me. Sorry, I got my pop sitting on where my document is. Other garbage. Okay, let me put it in the can. Okay, so it's sort of like this. I'm sorry, I haven't used my document camera in a while, so I'm looking for a pen. Here we go. Let's hope this one works. Okay, so here's the client. Yeah, let's say it's IBM. Just okay, and here's the auditors. Okay, so the client makes a sale to their customer. To say customer. I'm just gonna make this dollar amount up. Let's say they make a $2,000 sale to the customer. Okay, so they have an accounts receivable on their books for this customer of $2,000, right? They sent the computer or whatever they sent to the customer, and it was so. This is what we're trying to figure out, if this is a real number. Is this did this accounts receivable actually work? Because notice that this is, if it's just an accounts receivable on the client on the IBM's accounting system, this is the worst evidence. Okay, so the $2,000, we're not sure if that's a real sale or not. So what we do is we send a confirmation is sent to the customer. $2,000 confirmation sent to the customer, and then when they return it, so confirmation sent, and if they return it, and again, if it's a negative one, they only return it if it's wrong. If the $2,000 is wrong, that's $2,000. If it's a positive one, they have to return it anyways. So what we're doing is taking this 2,000. This is the worst evidence made by the client, held by the client. Now we're making it into the best evidence. The client never got a chance to look at it. This is coming from a third party. It's held by a third party. It's coming back to us. We're a third party.
Okay, so I get it. It's like basically running like a background check on like something that may be suspicious or like just like a bad form of
Yeah. How,
evidence.
how do you know that they just didn't say, "Oh man, we're short this quarter. We gotta just make some fictitious sales."
Hmm.
And this is the worst evidence. This is accounts receivable. This is their accounting system. They made this accounts receivable. They would make the invoice. They would make all this other stuff. And so we send out confirmations um, to see if did they actually sell, did IBM actually sell you this, and that's really what we're kind of asking the customer, whatever the customer is. So yeah, it is kind of confusing because IBM is our client. The customer is really IBM's client, so you have it is confusing which is which, because
Yeah, that's what was mixing me up is like the third party in the situation, but it makes more sense now.
yeah, and it's basically just to get to move the evidence up. So this is the worst evidence. We can't really use it. How do we use it? We do that. Now there are other ways to do it, and this is why the international standards don't require it. You could also, instead of sending out a confirmation, you can look at the bill of ladings. Get the bill of ladings from the shippers. Compare that to the sales invoice. If you sent eight toy trucks to this, you could look and see if there's 8 toy trucks on this bill of lading, and that would be evidence that it was shipped there. So you could also, if you didn't do the confirmations, you could also do it through the bill of lading. And that's why the international, just not me, completely different haircut. So that's why the international standards, they say, look, we don't tell you how to do it. You can do it through confirmations, you can do it through bill of lading, however you figure out if these are accurate. But you can look at a bill of lading and say, look, they shipped 8 of these, they billed 8 of these to the client. That's evidence, that it's corroboratory evidence that they have actually sent out the items to. So again, confirmation letters, they're required in the United States. So there's, unless it's like some severe situation. I'll give you an example. We had I used to work for Navistar, and we made diesel engines for Ford, and basically Ford took something like 97% of our production. The 3%, we sold to like people who made boats and stuff, but we made these diesel engines for Ford pickup trucks and stuff. And so when you get one customer that takes 97% of it, well, that's pretty much all you concentrate on is that one customer. You don't send it, the other 30 customers that make up the other 3% or whatever. There's no reason to do it for them. So there are some times that there's severe situations where you may not need to do these confirmations. But the rules are, unless you got a really good reason, you do the confirmations. Okay. And let's go to, hey, we're getting close. There's also another aspect to it. So let's say that you have two types of confirmations for whatever the account is. Now, the negative confirmations are not as good. Positive ones are better. Maybe worse and better. Worse and better. Okay, so we know the negative ones are not as good because we are less sure that something will come, that it'll come back if there's a problem. Positive ones are better, but they're more expensive. So the auditors would be equally satisfied with either of the following types of evidence. Which one should they choose? The negative ones or the positive ones? Now notice we have to take a lot more, of the negative ones because they're not as good. So we'll send out more of them. Which one should we do here? Any ideas? Oh, we just multiply them. So the negative ones that cost 1,500. Oops, don't do that. And the positive ones would be 2,000. So you want to go with the negative ones. Oops. If you're equally happy, the negative ones are cheaper. So we can learn a note down here. Auditors do not always take the best evidence. It might be too expensive. So as an auditor, it may be too expensive to take the best evidence. You may, if take lesser evidence, now you're gonna need more of it. But if it's because it might be cheaper to do that. And by the way, remember, you're doing an audit and there's costs around it, and you also owe it to your client to try to be efficient, right? Your costs, whatever you cost, you go into, they get kind of passed on to your client. So you're also, not only do you want to be efficient in your audit, but you also want to minimize the cost. Don't do things that are, don't foolishly waste the client's money on things that you don't need to. Okay, these lights are making me look like Dracula, which is kind of cool, but working papers. The working papers are the auditor's evidence. The working papers are the auditor's evidence to back up their audit opinion. So once you're done with the audit, you'll have all these working papers. And the working papers will show the different tests that you did. For instance, this confirmations, these will be in the working papers. There'll be working papers on those. A lot of them are electronic now. Although I have talked to many people who are doing audits, and they say they still use paper audits. There's still quite a bit of paper involved. Okay, so the working papers are the auditor's evidence to back up their opinion. The auditors own the working papers. Client has no right to them. So the working papers are the evidence that the auditors collect to back up their opinion. And the client has no right to see them. You might have a client say, well, I paid for this audit, I want the working papers too. Well, that generally doesn't happen. I mean, if there's an error you found and they want to know why, it's, you'd share with, like, well, here you have this, whatever the error is. And you might, you certainly would help them, to correct their financial statements and things like that. But generally speaking, the financial statements or the work papers, you don't share with them. And there could very well be things in those work papers that you don't want to share with them. Maybe there's evidence of, maybe someone gave you a tip that someone was creating a fraud, and you look into it and, nothing happened. Well, you don't want that to get out, that somebody with, misinformation gets out, as if it was evidence to the auditors. They may have just investigated it and found there's nothing there. So you don't want those work papers. The client generally doesn't get the work papers. If there's something they need, obviously you try to help them. But as far as just giving them all the work papers, doesn't happen. Not only that, you're discussing things like materiality, things that you don't discuss with the client. You don't tell the client how much materiality is for obvious reasons. If you tell them that, materiality is $500,000, and they go, oh, we can cook the books for $400,000 then. So you don't tell them what the materiality is. Well, that's all in the working papers. So they don't get to see the working papers. Again, you try to help them if you need to have, especially for making the financial statements, but they don't get all of the work papers. The auditors own the work papers. The auditors also a fiduciary duty to the client. So the confidential nature of the working papers. Auditors own the working papers, but the auditors also have a fiduciary duty to the client. Confidential information. We talked about this. Confidential information can only be given to third parties with a court ordered. Is that right? It doesn't look right. Maybe it is. I don't know. No, it's not right. There we go. Sub B. I missed a B. Okay. We talked about that before. Retention of work papers. AICPA. Five years. You must retain their work papers for 5 years. This is wrong. I'm stupid. Non-issuers, 5 years. Issuers, 7 years for the PCAB. Make sure you make this correction. Okay, so AICPA is for non-issuers. PCAOB issuers are 7 years. Now, if they're issuers, they have to also have to follow the AICPA. The AICPA is 5 years, but in this case, it doesn't really matter because PCOB is 2 years longer. Changing the work papers documentation after the release date. Okay, this is for non-issuers. Not 5 years, it is 60 days. Issuers, 45 days. Um, After these days, information can only be added to the working paper. So you can't take anything out after 60 days or 45 days. You can only add things to them. So if information comes up, you can put it in the file. But you can't take anything out of the file after 60 days for the AICPA and 45 days for the PCOB. For instance, like we talked about, let's say that there's someone accused someone of creating a fraud. You look into it and there's no evidence of it at all. I actually had one of those. I had a guy, my best friend came out to me and told, you want I know there's a fraud happening. Yeah, you look into it, it was completely ridiculous. But you document that, your work papers. Now, when you actually go to, what you leave in the work papers, you may very well take that out. It doesn't mean anything. It was just a stupid thing that didn't happen. So you might take that out because you don't want that information out there that someone was accused of committing a fraud or something that they didn't do. So you might just take that out, and now if it's in there past the 45 days, the 60 days for the AICPA or the 45 days for the PCOB, you can't do it. You have to leave it in. But usually that's the kind of stuff that gets taken out. This kind of stuff that's irrelevant to the audit is removed from it. Okay, that's a man I've been talking a lot. Yeah. Okay, well, we got this one done. We can send that one in. So next week we'll start in on chapter 6. And when we come back, we will start up with the monetary unit sampling. And let's say be back at yeah, 316. Okay. You guys cannot see what I'm doing. I'm an idiot. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go back to monetary unit sampling. All right. Recall last time that we take whatever it is we're sampling, we split it up into intervals, what we call intervals, and then pick one item to represent that entire interval. And it's very good at overstatement. So someone overstates something. If they overstate it over that interval, like the first problem we had $1,000 as our interval, then it was certain to be picked. So it's very good at overstatements. Oh, I didn't put the projected misstatement in here. I'm sorry. Okay, so these are the intervals, and we split it up by how many items we have. Okay, now for the wacky part. Sample size. How big of a sample do we take? And this looks a little complex, but this is actually much easier to do than for the classical sampling. I'll explain why in a second. But anyway, so here's the calculations that we do. So we take the total book value. This. Oops. Okay, so population book value. Plug it in down here. Reliability factor, we'll get to that later. Tolerable misstatement, we have that one. And we have the expected misstatement. Okay, so here's what we need to get. The reliability factor at 0 overstatements. We'll figure out what that is in a second. And we need to get the expansion factor. Okay, so we're going to go to this table at the very bottom of this page. And we're going to get a reliability factor at 0 statements. Now, we also need this number, risk of incorrect acceptance. So we're going to audit this to the 5% level, or in other words, we're 95% sure. All right, so let's go to the bottom of the page here. All right, so 5%. Row 0 is used reliability factor. I know this is a weird table and for sample size. And so at 0 overstatements, incorrect acceptance factor is 3. So I am going to go back up. I'm going to plug this 3 into this up here. All right. We need the expansion factor. Okay, we come down here. The nice thing about the expansion factor is it's just whatever it is. At 5%, it's 1.6. There's none of this stuff. All right, so 1.6. Okay, so now we can start doing, so the top here we have 1.6 million times 3. Down here, I would probably do this part first, this part that's in the parentheses, and then subtract it from the 120. All right, so where's my calculator? That was my little truck falling off the. There it is. Okay. Oh, what am I doing here? All right. So 1,600,000 times 3. I'm going to do this first. 5,000 times 1.6. 8,000. So this would be 120,000 minus 8,000. 112,000. All right, so sample size 4,800,000 divided by 112,000 equals 42.85. Read 6, I guess, if you off correctly. Now, we can't take 0.86 of an item, so we're going to round it off to the nearest one. So this will be rounded to 43. So this will be our sample size, 43. So we're going to take 43 items. Now the question is, what will our interval be? Our interval will be the total book value, 1.6 million, and we're going to split that up into 43 chunks. So 1.6 million divided by 43, whatever that is. I'm going to round off the nearest dollar, 37,209. So this will be our interval. Hey, what? That was weird. Okay. Oh, look at now, that's all funny. I don't know what I'm doing here. So this would be our number of items, and this would be our interval. So we take the first one that passes the 37,209, the next one that passes whatever was twice that, 74,418 or whatever. Now, you might look at this and say, well, that's kind of, it's kind of clumsy looking. And it is, but it's still way easier than for classical sampling. We didn't do the find the sample size for classical sampling. And there's a reason for that. It's quite involved. and also you have to get a standard deviation before you pick your sample, which means that somehow you have to either take a preliminary sample and get a standard deviation, or possibly even go to the previous year's, if you were there previously, the previous year's standard deviation that they had. So you have to find a standard deviation before you pick the sample size, which you don't have to do in this method. And there's a good reason why you don't have to do it in this method. This method, it's called monetary unit. Each unit, in this case dollars, each dollar is a sample, is an item in the sample. Now, here, let me, not that. I gotta turn the light on here again. So, for example, each item in the sample, each dollar is an item. So what is the standard? What's the deviation on here? What's the standard deviation? 0. They're all ones. There is no standard deviation. Each item is worth $1, which is kind of strange, but that's that's why that's why you don't need to get the standard deviation. There isn't one. It's 0. Each dollar is worth 1. It's monetary unit each dollar. So let's see here. Let me go back to number 3. You guys want to do this together? Or do you want me? Do you just want to do it on your own for homework? We'll take a vote. How many people want us to do this now, or how many people want to just do it as homework? I'll put the answer up next week. How many people want to do it now? Anyone? Anyone want to do it? Oh, the chat. Homework. Okay. All right. We'll make this homework, and then bring it in next time, and we will check it. If you have not turned in the exam yet, I know some of you have, make sure you turn that in this Friday. Well, I'll be grading it this Friday. And I know that I have someone turn in the chapter 1 and 2 that I need to grade. But we'll say this is homework for next class, and we will go over this one together next class. Okay. You want to take a picture of this one, anyone? All right. Well, I will see you guys next class. Have a good day, and I will see you in a week's time.
Thanks, Professor. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
I thought spring break was next week.
Is it? Darn. Let me go to the calendar. You're right. Thank you. Like I said, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. So yeah, enjoy your week off, and I will. Apologies. Tell all your friends, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. All right. See you guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.